This is my review of One Battle After Another by Paul Thomas Anderson. The latest PTA meeting is, once again, as usual, dominated by a superb level of perfectionist craftsmanship. It is often this perfectionist quality of Anderson that can get in the way of some of his larger points and deeper themes. Like almost every one of his there are small joys and treasures abundant. There are funny quips in the screenplay. There are also plenty of moments that'll just have you scratching your head, and I suppose you'll have to think about for the rest of your life, because after all, he is the master. Leonardo DiCaprio once again perfecting his doubtful lunatic shtick as Bob Ferguson, a former revolutionary/terrorist, depending on which side of the political spectrum you fall upon. Anderson wisely and perhaps sadly does not really commit to any political point of view. The scenes depicting illegal migrants are interesting in so much as they reveal about Sensei, played by Benicio del Toro. But I found no reason to call this a leftist Antifa film, like the right wants you to believe, unless you count making fun of Blanco Supremes as commie gobbledygook. Nah bro, you're just easily triggered. The so-called illegal immigrants aren't the main characters, so I didn't object to their portrayal, actually quite realistic, but my favorite scenes in the film were watching DiCaprio and Del Toro play each other off, almost as a buddy movie. Herein lies the main issue I had with One Battle After Another on my first viewing. The issue being, it fails to go all in on a single narrative thread. If this were a mini-series, this likely wouldn't even be an issue, but Anderson's never been that prolific or workmanlike. He's quality over quantity, which I suppose is just another way of approaching the material. Did I enjoy the film? I can tell you the first act I did not, at all. Perfidia is a thoroughly detestable piece of shit, fulfilling every common stereotype of the selfish black woman. Thankfully, she disappears for the rest of the film, which I enjoyed much more. However, I did appreciate the sly in-joke that Anderson pulls on Alana Haim, almost as if to say sorry for his last film, which we won't mention. I only bring that up because there are numerous moments in the film like that, where once I rewatched them in clips for this review, they hit way harder than they did on my first viewing, where admittedly one would likely be a bit more analytical, especially given the auteur status of the writer-director. Now, let's talk about that writing. I enjoyed the dialogue, but the structure and pacing of the story was definitely left something to be desired. The film seems, more than any of his previous works, to be intrigued by the idea of genre blending, genre meshing. We begin as a violent half-action flick with a leftist message, I suppose if you could call it that, slowly devolving into a buddy comedy chase picture, and finally, something of a misbegotten western like No Country for Old Men. Let's talk about the performances. Unsurprisingly, this is the film's shining highlight, its greatest quality, and I don't see anybody arguing with me on that. The most underutilized and disappointing character was the agent played by Regina Hall. Hall is a great comedic actress, and I was really pumped to see her get this part in a PTA joint. Unfortunately, her character isn't given much to do other than look wide-eyed at the camera. Chase Infinity, on the other hand, is captivating in her scenes as Leo's daughter, and pretty much everyone else has at least one or two memorable moments to add to a career highlight reel. Again, did not care for Tiana Taylor's over-sexualized shaboon, but again, you could argue she was intended to be a stereotype, much like Sean Penn's character, which we'll talk about. But yeah, this would be a valid argument for why this isn't a radical left-wing picture, but then again, Anderson's portrayal of the Sean Penn character would equally be an argument for why it is a radical left-wing picture, for daring to make fun of the Blanco Supremes. Did not care, by the way, for that Blanco Supreme Nick Fuentes subplot. It was cornball, it was jive turkey, even though that, again, perfectly acted by the actors playing the white supremacists, in that perfectionist vein of Anderson that we really get caught up in. But sometimes, you know what? I don't want a fucking dentist making an action movie, you know? Where's John Woo when you need him? Or maybe a young James Cameron. But yeah, Benicio del Toro was definitely my favorite character. He added a warmth to the proceedings, and I wish we had gotten more of him and DiCaprio doing their thing, kind of like Tarantino did in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Instead of these bullshit subplots, I would have liked this to be kind of a male bonding movie, but I understand that's not what it's going for. What it's actually going for is a movie about family, a movie about fathers and daughters, which was unexpected, and that's kind of the heart of this movie. It's not really this big action film like they're trying to sell you on, so don't be surprised about that. It's definitely more artsy and surrealist at points. And last but not least, Sean Penn seems a shoo-in for an Oscar nod as Colonel Lockjaw. It's such a great role. He's an almost Doctor Strangelove type villain with a pitiful character arc. His character endures most of the film's skewering, mirrored only by Tiana Taylor, and plus the idea that this government itself is comprised mostly of white men in the U.S. in 2025. I'm not so sure that's true, but it doesn't matter. If it's a well-made film, its messaging doesn't really matter, right? If Spielberg likes your picture, it's all dandy, right? Right? I don't know. Let's say the conspiracy theorists were spot on, the conspiracy theorists. Am I not allowed to praise, say, Leni Riefenstahl, who's Adolf's favorite filmmaker, for the craftiness of her Nazi party propaganda? If indeed we are living in similar times, I don't see how an inconvenient message invalidates great art. By that measure, you'd have to reevaluate Michelangelo, Andy Warhol, fucking everyone pretty much at any time period in any country. So, in closing, definitely had my trifles with this film. In deciding how to rank it, I might need a second watch, but there's that one chase scene in particular. It's so fucking good. It's one of the best chase scenes I think ever made. That's saying something. I'm not talking about the prolonged chase scenes that rely solely on the assumption and paranoia of the DiCaprio character that he's being chased. Even though, yes, he is technically being chased by vague government agents, I wouldn't necessarily classify those as chase scenes because they lack specificity and resolution. But if you were to classify one battle after another as one long 3-hour chase scene, you might have an argument. It's definitely not like Mad Max Fury Road or anything like that. Regardless, there will be that one chase scene that everybody talks about and remembers. It's an objectively classic bit of cinema with that Johnny Greenwood score. Breathtaking. And for that reason alone, plus the great performances, I would say there's more than enough here to recommend. One battle after another gets a 7 out of 10. What did you guys think? Am I tripping or am I winning? Well, you know the answer. Comment below your op-ed. Jake Jones, I'm out of here.